most of the Danish vessels around Greenland can take about 1 meter thick ice, and that's actually something that's substantial. They are all, also prepared for these Arctic conditions. And to my knowledge, that's not something that's really prevalent in the U.S. Navy. So from that aspect, it's not really the scenario that you would imagine the Americans would go through with.
Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Trump Report. We are still here in Greenland and I'm joined by Jacob Karsbo, who is a former Danish Defence Intelligence officer, I suppose we could say. Jacob, we have spent the last day or so exploring some of the fjords here in Greenland and going out to some of the settlements a little further out than Nuuk. It's been quite an interesting trip, hasn't it? It probably tells us a lot about why the US, if they were going to use military action in Greenland, probably wouldn't have been able to use a naval assault of the style we saw in Venezuela. Let's start with the water itself first. What are some of those obstacles we've seen, and how would that affect the sort of planning for this sort of operation?
Yeah, some of the obstacles are that, for one thing, you have to gather a sizable naval force, and that would give Danes and other allies years or days of warning to prepare. That's one issue. And then also simply the seas around here, the fjords, the steepness of the mountains surrounding the fjords. So it's really very hard to get here, and it's very hard to get here without defensive forces knowing days in advance and being able to prepare.
And one thing that was very noticeable for us as we came up through the fjords on a boat, the amount of ice. What sort of impact is that going to have?
Yeah, I mean, as we can see here behind us now, there are icebergs and ice drifting. That complicates matters, and that's actually harder and harder the further north you go around these coasts. So it's very hard, and just to have all that local knowledge is not usually what you find. I mean, we've had Danish Navy patrols up here for years and years, usually doing search and rescue and fishery support, etc., etc. So they know the waters, but for people that are not used to these Arctic conditions, it would be very tough going.
But we've got one behind us actually at the moment, just drifted in this morning.
Yeah.
This wasn't here 24 hours ago. It goes to show how quickly things shift when you're navigating a sort of subarctic environment like this, I suppose. We also saw some pretty big icebergs, maybe even bigger than that, on our way out. Why are ships so worried about icebergs? Because a lot of people probably don't realise the extent to which ice can become an obstacle.
No, as you were saying, it changes all the time. And today, as a matter of fact, this is the most ice we've seen in this fjord here. So it changes all the time. And, you can go fast by boat. Suddenly there's ice. And that's why, the locals are the experts here. They know exactly when and where to go. And you really need that knowledge, how to navigate it. From what we know is these most of the Danish vessels around Greenland can take about 1 meter thick ice, and that's actually something that's substantial. And the other factor is that you can only see the tip of the iceberg really. About 20 centimeters at most is what you can see, and then 80% below. So you have to know about these conditions, and that's extremely tough.
And of course, as you mentioned, there is also a near constant Danish naval presence here. As we came out of the harbour in our relatively small boat there, we could see these large ships looming over us. They're going to have a sort of home turf advantage, aren't they, for anyone trying to navigate waters around here that Denmark doesn't want to?
Yeah, we do. And also we have our good friends and allies just next to here, the Canadians. they're sending a navy or a coast guard cutter up here, and they are all, also prepared for these Arctic conditions. And to my knowledge, that's not something that's really prevalent in the U.S. Navy. So from that aspect, it's not really the scenario that you would imagine the Americans would go through with.
And also, we stopped off at one of the settlements further out in Greenland. I think Ilushiet was the name of it, or Iluslit. Difficult to pronounce if you don't speak the local language. And going there and visiting the people that live there, it does just show the harshness of spending any amount of time outside of the major settlements here in Greenland, and just the difficulty anyone would have navigating even the areas further south in Greenland that are pretty navigable. How tricky would it be for a military force, do you think, to land anywhere in Greenland that wasn't somewhere like Nuuk or one of the big settlements?
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing about defending Greenland. It's only a very few places where you can actually go and have an impact. You can't just land somewhere on the coast because there's nothing to connect the coast. So either you have a boat and go from A to B, and can make a landing from there, or you won't get anywhere. So that's really the tricky part, and that also is the advantage for the force that is defending, because they will always know, okay, it's got to be here around Nuuk, it's got to be in these places and these places. So therefore it's actually a pretty easy landmass to defend, and just dropping soldiers off somewhere is not going to lead to anything good, other than very harsh conditions and a low likelihood of survival. So you really have to design these things if you want to stand any chance of success.
And we've noticed, of course, even just in the last few days, this increased Danish military presence, even here in Nuuk. I mean, it's nothing that is frightening or worrying for the locals, certainly, but it is visible. There's more soldiers around. How reassuring is that going to be? And what's the advantage of having that sort of enhanced troop presence here in Nuuk and
No,
Greenland?
it's definitely here. When I speak to the locals, there's usually one cutter or two max. Now we have three. We also have, larger vessels, not quite frigate, but just corvette, large corvette, and as I was saying before, we have European allies. The Canadians are also sending a few vessels here, for a very nervous population. That's reassuring. And I would say one thing that has surprised me is perhaps the posture you see. I know there's an exercise going on, and of course, when you exercise, you train for the real conditions. But when I saw the guards down at the harbor, that's where the Navy is located, I was like thinking, okay, that's a different setup to what you would normally see. So definitely there's a sense here that we need to be here, we need to show force, and guard against this. But as I said before, the important thing to remember is really the landscape here, the coastline is a big advantage for the defender.
And it is also worth noting how tricky it is once you get onto land here in Greenland, just to navigate around the sort of hard surface, whether that's actual, solid ground like we're stood on at the moment, or ice. How hard can it be? I mean, for example, only a few less than a mile this way, the road here stops.
Yeah.
There is no way of driving from the capital to the next major settlement. How tricky does that make it, and how experienced the troops, especially from Denmark, need to be able to navigate overland in Greenland?
Yeah, I mean that's one factor, definitely, because you can't really get anywhere, and armored vehicles won't get you. It'll get us 10 kilometers around Nuuk here, but not further than that. And that's why, a lot of this debate has been about these Danish dog sleighs.
Yes.
But what few people realize is that for large stretches of the coastline here in Greenland, it's actually the only place, only way you can get around. You can the Danish armed forces here have tried to use skidoos and all kind, and it goes wrong. And dog sleighs, good old fashioned dog sleighs, are really the only way that you can get around. So I mean that whole preparation, it seems old fashioned, and we must be able to do something that is technically more advanced, but it doesn't work. So that's why the experience here is vital.
And you mentioned that Denmark has these vessels that are designed to navigate ice and these sort of icy environments. Which other nations have that sort of capability?
Yeah, I would say in this neighborhood here, it's the Canadians mainly that are well prepared. And to be honest, to my knowledge, the U.S. Doesn't really have a lot of that capability. It would surprise perhaps also a lot of people to hear, and I have to acknowledge, it also surprises me when I hear more about it, that large vessels aren't advantageous in these conditions. Actually, the Danish Navy prefers smaller vessels. When you get up to the frigate class and so on, it gets complicated because of the sea and the maneuverability of the vessels. So there are a lot of factors that come into play.
Jacob Carswell, thank you very much for speaking to me today.
Thank you.